I built one fence on my own land, and somehow that turned into an HOA meltdown, a trespassing stunt, and a courtroom law so brutal, I almost felt embarrassed of them almost. That's what still gets me. I wasn't bothering anybody. I wasn't chasing drama. I was just protecting land my family had worked for almost a century, and a bunch of people who'd been there 5 minutes decided they had more say over than I did. By the time it ended, all that fake authority blew away like dust in the dry wind. My name's Clay Banner, and I live on 120 acres in Texas, land my family's held since 1931. Out here, land isn't just property. It's history. My grandfather broke his back on that soil. My father held on to it through droughts, bad cattle years, and hard times. Then it came to me, and I treated it the same way they did, like something you protect, because once you let people chip away at it, they don't stop at the edges. For most of my life, it was quiet. I had cattle, long mornings, fence lines to check, and the kind of silence that let the man think straight. Then a subdivision went up along my north boundary. Nice little houses, perfect lawns, folks chasing the dream of country living without any interest in what country life actually is. They liked the view of my ranch just fine, but they sure didn't like being reminded it was a working piece of land and not part of their curated little brochure world. I didn't care at first. Their streets, their rules, their opinions, none of that had anything to do with me. My deed was older than their entire development. But once they built that road too close to my line, I got that old feeling in my gut, the one that says trouble is still far away, but it's walking toward you. So I reinforced the north fence. Nothing flashy. Cedar posts, tight wire, warning signs, cameras. The whole thing built solid and legal. Clean, strong, clear. Private property. No trespassing. End of story. I remember standing there when I finished, looking at that fence in the evening light, feeling like I'd done exactly what any sane landowner would do. Then the letters started. First one came in a glossy envelope from the HOA president, Bradley Sloan. It said my fence violated the visual standards of their community and needed to be removed for the sake of neighborhood harmony. Harmony on my ranch. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then the second letter showed up, and that one wasn't funny. Same polished nonsense, but sharper, more demanding. It came with a map, too, with a red line running right over the northern strip of my land like they'd already decided it belonged to them in spirit, if not in law. That's when I wrote back. I kept it simple. Told them my ranch was not in their HOA, had never been in their HOA, and would never be in their HOA. I included copies of my deed, county parcel records, and an old boundary map for good measure. I figured that would end it. I figured once facts hit the table, the fantasy would die. I gave them too much credit. A few days later, one of my cameras picked up two men at my fence line, wearing HOA polos and carrying clipboards. One stood there taking pictures like he was inspecting a crime scene. The other climbed over my fence like my warning signs were decoration. He walked my land like he owned it. I didn't go storming out there. Didn't yell. Didn't even call right away. I just saved the footage. A week later, I found a section of wire cut near the same boundary. Not old damage. Not weather. A clean cut. I checked the cameras, and there he was again. Same guy, same shirt, same clipboard crowd. Crouched down with bolt cutters, clipping my fence like it was his weekend project. That's when it stopped being annoying and started being personal. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Ramirez came out, watched the footage, checked the fence, and said exactly what I was thinking: criminal trespass, property damage, maybe more depending on how far they wanted to push it. Then he looked up toward that subdivision and just shook his head. I could have filed right then, but I held off for one reason. I wanted to know how deep this thing went. If Bradley Sloan was just a loud fool, that was one problem. If the whole board had signed off on this nonsense, that was another. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long. About a week later, I got served. They actually filed a civil complaint against me. Said my fence obstructed shared visual access, disrupted planned connectivity, and interfere with the intended character of the neighborhood. That a lot of pretty words for we want your land and don't like being told no. Buried in the paperwork was a real poison. They were claiming an easement, not one with real legal teeth, not one properly recorded. Just some vague developer language they were twisting into a story where my northern strip had somehow become useful to their future walking trail and utility plan. In plain English, they were trying to bully me into surrendering part of my ranch because it made their subdivision look nicer on paper. That should tell you everything you need to know about people like that. They don't start by asking for all of it. They start with a strip, a corner, a compromise. Then they act offended when you refuse to hand over what's yours. So I hired an attorney named Ellen Pierce, a local property lawyer who had the calm voice of a Sunday school teacher and the mind of a butcher. I brought her every document I had, deeds, surveys, tax records, camera footage, copies of their letters, all of it. She looked through the stack, leaned back in her chair, and said, "Mr. Banner, these people are either profoundly confused or dangerously arrogant." Then she smiled a little and added, "Sometimes it's both." That woman was worth every penny. She dug up the full title history on my land and found what I already suspected. My parcel had never been annexed, never absorbed, never burdened by HOA restrictions, and never subject to any easement benefiting that subdivision. Not once. Not ever. Their claim wasn't weak. It was fantasy with a filing fee. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. Ellen found old planning documents from when the subdivision was first designed. A former developer consultant, a man named Richard Hale, had warned them years earlier that my property was separate, protected, and not to be included in any future access assumptions. He'd put it in writing. They knew. Bradley and at least 2 board members had access to those records the whole time. That changed everything. This wasn't confusion anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They knew the land wasn't theirs. And they pushed anyway. They sent letters anyway. They crossed my fence anyway. They cut it anyway. They sued anyway. Discovery was a beautiful thing. Ellen got their internal emails. And reading those was like watching people dig their own grave with expensive keyboards. Bradley called my ranch an obstacle to community cohesion. One board member asked whether pressure tactics might make me sell the strip just to avoid the hassle. Another literally joked that old rural owners usually fold once legal costs rise. That one made me laugh. Because if there's one thing you should never assume about a man whose family held land to the Depression, it's that he'll fold just because paperwork gets mean. Court day came, and Bradley walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck tires, carrying himself like he was about to teach a master class in suburban authority. I came in with Ellen, my records, my footage, and a kind of piece that only shows up when the truth is finally locked and loaded. Their side talked first. A lot of polished phrases, a lot of talk about neighborhood design, shared expectations, and reasonable integration. Judge barely blinked. Then Ellen stood up. She walked the court through the title chain, the survey maps, the county records, the written warning from the original consultant, the HOA letters, the trespassing footage, and finally the video of their own man cutting my fence. You could feel the room shift. Bradley stopped looking confident around the time the video played. By the end of it, he looked like a man wishing very hard for a fire alarm. Then Ellen dropped the email chain. Not all of it, just enough. Enough to show they knew my land wasn't theirs. Enough to show they talked openly about pressuring me. Enough to show the suit wasn't filed in good faith. That was the moment Bradley's whole posture changed. You know that look people get when they realize this isn't going sideways. It already went sideways, hit the ground, and caught fire? That was him. The judge dismissed their claim, confirmed my boundary, and then opened the door for sanctions and damages. Trespass, property damage, legal fees. The whole ugly bundle they'd billed for me ended up landing right back in their laps. Bradley tried to speak after that, something about acting in the interest of the community, but the judge cut him off so fast the words practically fell on the floor. A month later, The HOA's insurer settled the rest. My attorney fees were covered. Fence repairs were covered. Additional damages were covered. Bradley resigned before summer ended, and 2 board members quietly followed him out the door. Last I heard, people in that neighborhood were furious their dues had gone up to clean up a mess created by the very folks who claimed they were protecting property values. That part felt just about right. As for me, I rebuilt that cut section of fence stronger than before. Same cedar, same wire, same signs, same cameras. Only difference was the silence after that. No more letters. No more board members wandering up to my line. No more slow-moving SUVs full of self-appointed experts in what I should do with land they'd never bled for. And I'll tell you something I learned from all of it: power makes some people stupid. Even tiny power. Give somebody a title, a stamped letterhead, a little board seat, and they start mistaking process for ownership, confidence for truth. They think if they push hard enough, ordinary people will give in just to make the noise stop. And sometimes that works. That's the ugly part. But sometimes they run into somebody who knows exactly what a line is and has the records, the patience, and the backbone to hold it. So the last image I have of this whole mess is one I still enjoy. Me standing by that north fence at sunset, hand resting on a cedar post, wind moving to the grass, Duke stretched out nearby, and that subdivision sitting quiet on the other side like a room after an argument nobody won. My land was still mine. My fence was still standing. And every inch they tried to take had cost them more than they ever imagined. So tell me, when people in power know they're wrong but push anyway, is fighting back just self-defense, or does it become a kind of revenge once you decide to make sure they pay for every step? And have you ever dealt with someone who thought rules gave them the right to take what was never theirs?